Welcome back. Right now there's an increased focus and attention on women's professional sports. Basketball certainly being at the top, and obviously Caitlin Clark's popularity is a big reason why. Angel Reese, Paige Beckers, Asia Wilson. There are plenty of others, but obviously Caitlin Clark has really put the WNBA on the map. From a national perspective. The upcoming 2026 season is set to begin in May. However, there is a looming threat of a WNBA lockout or a potential strike for this upcoming season. The most recent collective bargaining agreement expired in January, so just last month. They did have a couple of previous extensions, but now the WNBA and the Players Association, they're pretty far apart on a new deal. We were talking Major League Baseball earlier in the show, and the current CBA in Major League Baseball expires after this season in December. And negotiations for a new agreement are expected to be contentious there. And there's a potential for a lockout in 2027. So we'll get into that story another day, but just to give you context kind of on where labor negotiations stand, MLB about to be at a crossroads, the WNBA is currently there. I say all of that as we transition to how professional sports have shifted and how individual athletes are now more in control of their own brands aside from just their affiliation with a particular team. It's not new. It's not a newer development that athletes endorsing products. That's been going on since the beginning and still do. But now with the advent of social media, it goes beyond commercial advertisement and things of that nature. One area where athletes are front and center is through fashion. Game day fits, like that's a thing. Game day fits. In fact, different teams, like different sports, they employ photographers. And one of the aspects of the job is shooting the game day arrivals to see what the athletes are wearing. So it's not just like the red carpet, when you go to the Oscars or the Emmys and they say, what are you wearing? Now that's a thing in professional sports. What do the athletes look like when they arrive? And that's not just in men's sports. Sportscaster Emily Wisniewski provides a fashionable commentary on that.
Let's talk some fashion. Now, if you're listening, just imagine that I'm decked out in some like sick attire. And well, if you're watching, then I hope you think this SEC sweatshirt is as stylish as I do. But, anyways, so sports are at kind of a very interesting point in history. We've got social media and the internet making us more connected than ever. And so, US sports figures are kind of like celebrities, which prior, like in the 90s, you had to be almost like a Michael Jordan level to be known around the world, to grab the world's attention, right? And so, with this crossover, we've kind of started to realize that it's not necessarily just about the game anymore. It's kind of about these athletes' personal brands and their personal styles. You've kind of got like a whole fan group with this section now. And so the NBA, their pregame attire, it's always been talked about, right? But the WNBA, well, let's just say these girls are giving the guys a run for their money. So, Pop Sugar, they released an article back in 2024. Don't worry, it's still quite relevant in 2026. And they were talking about the WNBA fashion and kind of how these players' personal styles are really starting to come to life. So, okay, quick history lesson here, real quick. So, the WNBA, it was founded in 1996. You had players like Cheryl Swoops, Cynthia Cooper, and Lisa Leslie, rocking kind of like the functional athletic wear, kind of making it stylish, which that was the style in the 90s, early 2000s. So it worked. And then we hit the 2010s, and this is kind of where high fashion really started to take the reins. You had more athletes being featured in these high fashion magazines. You have the girls hitting the tunnels, which in a way is kind of like their own runway now in these like lavish, cool designer fits. Then you even in the 2020s, most recently, had players like Angel Reese actually hitting the real runways, the Victoria's Secret runway to be exact. And so The WNBA, it's been really fascinating to watch kind of evolve these past couple years because in like 2023, 2024 to be exact, this is when the league really took off because you had a group of powerhouse college players like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese making their debut into the league. Now, side note here, I don't want to step on anyone's toes when I say this. We're just looking at this from a fashion aspect, nothing more, nothing less. But Pop Sugar alluded to in this article that without the success seen in women's college basketball, the WNBA, fashion wise, really wouldn't be where it is today. And here's why. NIL. NIL completely changed the game for all sports, but women's sports in particular, because these smaller programs that maybe didn't receive the funding that like basketball, men's basketball rather, and like football did receive, these players are now being able to lock in these major brand deals, making money for themselves, increasing their exposure, using the social media following that they have to really generate all of this excitement. And so, with the increased exposure of women's basketball, you've got more money flowing through the sport, more brand deals locking in not only with the players, but also like teams in the league as well. And it's given these ladies more confidence to have some kind of like fun with their fits, let their personal style show, in their personal runway heading to the locker room, or they can use their style, start speaking out for what they believe in. So in 2025, the 2025 All-Star game, all the girls were warming up in shirts that said, "Pay us what you owe us." Now, this was, of course, alluding to the players demanding higher salaries and better revenue sharing with the league's rapid growth. Now, to put it in perspective, at the time, the NBA revenue share, I think, was about at like 51%. Women's was raving around that like 6 to 7% mark. Major difference, right? And so, in all, with this, WNBA, it's popping off. And guess what? It's only going to keep growing from here. And so, to really put it like how Pop Sugar wrapped up this article, the girls, they're kicking these doors down, whether it be speaking out for what they believe in, stepping out in their style. More and more opportunities are going to continue to grow in this industry. And the girls, well, they're doing it one fine fit at a time.
One fit at a time. That was Sportscaster's Emily Wisniewski. You know, Detroit's going to be getting a WNBA franchise again in 2029. It'll mark the return of the WNBA to Detroit. Remember, the Detroit Shock played here from 1998 to 2009, won 3 WNBA championships under head coach Bill Laimbeer. So I'm excited about the prospect of having women's pro basketball back, as we all are. And again, we're all hopeful that the two sides are able to come to an agreement so that there will be WNBA basketball next season. But again, Detroit will be getting its very own WNBA franchise coming up in 2029. So from women's professional basketball to women's professional volleyball. That's right. The new Major League Volleyball. It is underway. We're about a month into the season. We'll get into that on the other side of a break.